Because let's be real, when have you ever really remembered what you memorized? I didn't. I'd panic, I'd write it on the paper to try to remember, and it'd be like... Hey there, my handsome and pretty little Cobras, and welcome back to the Cobra's Nest. For those of you who are new, my name is Mignon Cobra, and I make minimalism videos. I think I might be changing that outro soon. So today is a video request, and it's all about studying, and it's actually a video request from one of my longtime subscribers, Ingrid. Hi Ingrid. She asked if I could give some details on studying, which is something that I actually have a lot of experience in. I do have a lot of certifications in education, and yeah, it turns out that education is an area that I actually have a lot of experience in. So today I'm going to be answering or giving 10 tips for studying from the perspective of somebody who graduated from med school and is a teacher herself. So without further ado, let's just get into the video. Let's get it. Let's go. Woo. Okay, so the first thing that I just want to give is my background info, because that is something that Ingrid asked about. So like, what is my education? I'm actually a teacher. I went to the University of Toronto for life sci because I was trying to go to med school, which I did like a little mini roundabout. I actually ended up becoming a teacher instead because my marks weren't good enough. But yeah, I actually ended up going abroad. So I was a teacher for a bit, and then after that, I actually got accepted into dentistry abroad in China. So I went into dentistry. So yeah, my certifications, I have a bachelor's degree in science. I'm a certified Canadian teacher or Ontario teacher because we do it by, our boards are based on provinces. So I have a lot of experience with education. I have a lot of experience with being a student, and then also what it's like from the perspective of a teacher. I have been a teacher for almost 10 years now. Can you believe it? How time flies. And so I'm going to be sharing today with you guys 10 tips on what I think you guys could do to get good marks, have a good relationship with studying, and just be the best student that you can be while living your best life. And number one, which I think is a question that every student wants to know, is like how to pass your exams. So as somebody who has written countless exams, both at the university level and at the med school level, to pass your exams is actually based on the foundations that you lay in the very beginning of the semester. You have to study to be able to do well on your exams. I never understood how students crammed. I never saw a student that did well. The students that I saw crammed always just passed. Like, let's be real, they always just passed. Students that I saw would perform well is if you actually studied and you actually understood the material. So my recommendation is, if you want to do well in a course or in a subject, I would recommend actually learning and studying the material instead of trying to cram or find any quick little tip fixes. It's just not going to work. And I've seen it time and time after again with both my own personal experience and also with students. You'll do well if you actually understand and learn the material. I know that's probably not the thing that anybody wanted to hear, but if you wanted like real talks, I recommend understanding the material than trying to cram for it. You won't perform well, and let's be real, you know that if you've crammed, you've never performed well. So let's actually talk into how to actually study. So number two, what is the best way to study? So I have seen from my own personal experience and also from like watching other YouTubers who also, while I was in med school, I would watch a lot of med school YouTubers. Ali is one of them, and I'll put it down here. And I learned a very good tip is to study in chunks. Studying in chunks is very helpful, and if you're wondering how big of a chunk, so I would study for about like 20 to 30 minutes doing something. I think this is also called the Pomodoro method. If I would chunk my study sessions, I would do 20 minutes, 30-minute sessions, and then I would take like a 10-minute break and I would do something else, scroll on my phone, do something else. But I was very disciplined and I'd go back to it. And I never studied longer than 3 hours in like a chunk, like with these little mini breaks. After 3 hours, like I'm like, okay, I'm done. I don't think that your brain, because I also studied neurology. That if you're wondering what my major was in science, I actually studied neurology. So the study of the brain was something that we'd cover, and the way that your neurons work, you actually don't process much beyond a certain point. I think your capacity in the day to memorize, the way that the dendrites process information, you're saturated after a couple hours anyway, so you're not efficient at that point anymore. For you to continue studying beyond that point is just not good for you. I mean, granted, I'm not here telling anybody what to do. I had classmates who would study forever, and I also too would study for a really long time, but I found that sweet spot of 3 hours was enough. You don't have to chunk it as 3 hours. You could just do like 1 hour, do something else, another hour, like another hour. This is how I regularly study. This is not how I would cram. When it was exam time, like that 1 week, I was studying like a dog. So let's just say like during regular study sessions in the day, I would just study no more than 3 hours. During exam session, I would go ham. The other thing is that I want to say is that when you regularly study, make sure that you give yourself breaks. It is really important to not dread studying, and that's why I say don't study more than 3 hours. If you do big study sessions, you start to become less and less efficient, or even you don't even want to study that much. And that was something that would happen to me if I studied like hardcore at the library. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore because I would just not give myself myself breaks. But once I started giving myself like little mini breaks, like I would be at the library, I would go down, I would get a Starbucks, come back up to the library. I felt so much better, and I felt like, oh, refreshed, and I could keep doing. And I didn't feel guilty that I would take a break. The other thing that I would also do is, so if once I studied for about 2 to 3 hours, but I would go and work out. After I finished studying, I would then go to the building next door, and I would go to school gym and I would work out. There's a period of time where I didn't pay for the school gym. I would just go for a run around my neighborhood. Working out helped so much. I really do think that the reason that I did really well in school was because I made sure that I had physical exercise. I don't think sitting in a chair all day long is going to be good for your mental health. Like, studying aside, I think it's really important to get some physical exercise. My exercises were never anything strenuous. I literally would just go for a run for like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, lift some weights, call it a day. We are good to go. Okay, the third thing is, if you are an online student, and I actually have had experience with online studying, I also teach students online. When I was an online student, my last semester of dental school was online. One thing that I can say is that if you are studying at home and there are other people in the house and stuff like that, I recommend finding a designated little area where you can have some quiet time to study. If that is not possible, which I understand is not always the case, I also bought these little pluggy squishy thingies that you could put in your ears so that like it cancels out noise, so you could just like focus on what your work is. In terms of quietness, I would recommend listening to music that has no vocals or like lyrics, just like instrumental. That also helps a lot, because like, I don't know for other people, but for me, if there's lyrics in the music, I start to focus on the lyrics and not my work, so that is not a really efficient use of your time. I like to listen to like very like slow jazz or instrumentals, piano music, nature sounds, zen sounds. Those sounds really help put me in like those, like, I don't know what they're called, like beta waves, delta waves, that really help me learn a lot, which I think is really good, because I feel like I can go the mile with that type of music. Like, I found I could study longer, focus longer, retain longer when I had that type of music. But when I was listening to like, I don't even know, like R&B or like EDM, I wasn't really retaining it. So that's just my own personal preference. Okay, and number 4, do the hard topics in the morning. So as I've mentioned, I studied life sci, which means that I was studying biology and math. Those subjects, in my opinion, are harder than English. I've written books my entire life, so English was not hard for me, but math and science definitely was not easy for me. So I always made sure that I studied those subjects first thing in the morning when I had like enough mental capacity to like process it. By nighttime, my brain's fried. I can't do math at night. Like, it's not my thing. I mean, like, I can do it now because I've been doing it for years, but when I was first learning, calculus, advanced functions, I made sure that I did my math homework first. Once I got that out of the way, I felt like my brain could just be like, oh, thank God, that's over. We can do the easier subjects. Do the subject when you feel you have the most mental capacity. Some people are owls. They do better at night. So if night is when you're strongest, do the hard stuff then. Okay, number 5, pay for a tutor or pay for cram sessions. Obviously, this sounds very like self-promotion because I'm a tutor, but let me tell you, for me, myself, when I was first year, the one course I almost failed was biochemistry. I don't know, I guess it just wasn't clicking with me. As somebody who's always done really good in school, I've always gotten like 80s and 90s. I just realized that like sometimes you need a little bit of help. My first tutor session stuff was in university when I felt like I needed the help to be able to go to med school. So there were these cram sessions, like these little mini schools where like students who were in 4th year or were first year medical school who got really good marks would teach the first years. And so I paid for like a package, and let me tell you, it was worth it. Like the first mark I got was a 53, but then I got like a 90 something on the midterm. So I mean, overall my final grade wasn't the greatest, but like it definitely saved me. And so anytime I struggled, like after that, I learned to like seek out professional help. And I know obviously this tip is privileged, like I didn't have a tutor growing up except for when I was like older. I know that having a tutor is not always cheap, but if financially you can, I think that if you are struggling in a subject, you might consider getting a tutor. I do think it's worth it. As somebody who tutors for a living, I definitely see that not stressing about your marks and having somebody teach it to you and help you helps a lot. So, okay, number 6, ask the teacher for help. I would always go to the teacher's physical office. I know that nowadays with many students being online, this tip might not be a valid tip anymore, but when I was in university, all classes were in person. So for me, I would always go to the teacher's office hours and I would always ask the teacher for help. Like I'd be like, I didn't understand this topic. And the teachers were more than willing to help me. And I remember some of the questions or things that I would ask, the teacher would kind of lead me in the right direction, would actually be the questions on the test. And obviously, like, I'm not saying like it's a form of cheating, but like the teacher would like pretty much help you with the test. So I think asking the teacher for help is the best way to go about it, because the one marking the test is like the teacher or the TA, or the TA based on the teacher's notes. So you really just want to cater to the teacher, because it's not really about how much you know, but how much can you regurgitate back to the teacher what the teacher wants you to know, you know? Number 7, exchange note with friends. So there's only so many hours in the day that you can study. I highly recommend, if this is a possibility for you, if you have classmates or friends that are in the same like stream as you, share notes. So for me, all of my friends, we were all life size, so we'd always share notes, we'd always share tips, we'd always share like little tidbits. During med school, we would share practice tests. We would just share the resources. I would pass my notes on to close friends and things like that. Like, I know that it's common, because I was in this too. People gatekeep their notes, and I respect that. I wouldn't give notes to students that I knew did nothing, and then like 2 days before the test, I'm like, can I borrow your notes? I'm like, it's not happening. I'm sorry. No. But between friends that I know studied really hard and had good notes, we would share our notes, and we would just like raise the vibe, and it definitely helped a lot. I really do credit a lot of my success to having had, I guess, like a communal sharing environment, if that's something that is possible for you. Okay, number 8, what to eat. So I've always been an advocate to eating healthy. I mean, in the sense of studying, I noticed that when I was eating a lot of garbage, my studying would just like hit the floor. Like I would get lethargic, I would get bored, like I wouldn't be able to focus. So I tried my best when I was like, you know, being serious about my studying, whether it be like getting closer to the exam or studying for like a hard topic, I would try to avoid eating these processed foods. If I was studying, I wouldn't eat them. It wasn't until like maybe at night or when I was done studying and it didn't matter if I became lethargic, I could eat it. But while I was studying, I just kept it clean. You know, I eat protein, some carbohydrates like a bread or rice, and like chicken, and then like drink tea or coffee, and just kept it real clean. And I felt like I had the capacity to study. Like I felt good. It was just clean energy. It was like a good vibe. So okay, number 9, how to memorize. I always tell my students this. I'm like, do not memorize. You need to understand. No amount of memorization is going to save you. In neurology, we learned that the human brain only has 7 units of memorization. That's it. You can remember 7 things. After that, you're not going to remember anything. That's the only capacity you have. But if you understand it, you've encoded it differently, like in a different part of your brain. So I always tell students, like, try to understand. You are going to do so much better on the test if you understand what you're doing. So I always recommend to students, try to understand it, watch some tutorials on YouTube, seek some help, ask your teacher, do more practice questions if you don't understand it. If you have to resort to memorization, it just means that you don't understand it enough, and I don't recommend it, because let's be real, when have you ever really remembered what you memorized? I didn't. I'd panic. I'd write it on the paper to try to remember, and it'd be like, okay, and number 4. So I think staying hydrated is really important. So drink tea and coffee to keep yourself going. I know that this is probably controversial. Maybe not everybody recommends these tips. You know, don't use stimulants. But I'm giving you real talk here, right? As somebody who actually went through med school, what it takes to be a good student. I always was drinking tea like nonstop. I would drink matcha. I would drink green tea, black tea, coffee, keep myself going. I always had like a flask of water beside me. Like that is like a student staple. I always stayed hydrated, and I also avoided snacking. Like if I felt like a little some, you know how sometimes you feel like that. I think in Japanese it's called bored mouth or lonely mouth. So you start to snack. You can overcome that by like just drinking. So that's what I would do. Instead of like eating to keep my like self going, I would just drink. And it's just like so much better for you. 1, you stay hydrated because you're hitting your water target. And 2, you're curing a lonely mouth. Okay, number 11, block out free time. So this is my last tip, is I think that it's really important for you to block out free time. As a student, you might feel guilty. Oh no, I shouldn't watch Netflix, and maybe I shouldn't read manga. I think that is really important for your mental health. You need to enjoy the process of being a student. You won't be a student forever. You should enjoy the process. You should be happy with what you learn, and you should also enjoy the process of being a student. So for me, I always made sure I had downtime. The downtime for me was like I would watch Netflix, or I'd watch like a Korean drama, or I would read a manga, or I would read like just like a book for fun, like a novel, like something that made me feel really happy and content in my life. I always included that in my lifestyle, which I think is good, but I just wanted to put a little caveat. Don't abuse it. I mean, yes, you can read manga, but that doesn't mean you're going to read manga for 3 hours. Give yourself maybe 30 minutes, 40 minutes, enjoy it, feel good, and then come back to doing what it is that you need to do. Because honestly, short-term pleasure is just going to cause long-term pain. Don't do it to yourself. Use it as something to motivate yourself. Do it after you have finished studying and you feel good and you're like, I was responsible and I did what I need to do. You'll feel guilt-free and enjoying the things that make you happy, you know? Okay, and then the last thing that I just want to leave this all on is that while I do think it's important to have balance, studying is something that what you put in is what you get back out. So For me, I went really hard at studying. That was all that I did. I was a big nerd. I studied really hard and for really long hours. And that was the mindset that I had, because the goal that I wanted was I wanted to do well in what I did. So I was like, if I'm going to be a student, I'm going to be a good student. So I think that you should enjoy the process, but you should also know that it will pay off. If you study hard, it will show off in the way that your marks come back and stuff like that. So be smart, be efficient, be diligent, be disciplined, and it will definitely pay off, and enjoy it. So I really hope that this could have helped anybody else out. Thank you so much, Ingrid, for the subscriber requests. I love these. That's my favorite part of YouTubing, is creating these requests for you guys. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.